As usual, we'll be kicking off with the Board of Adjustment cases here this afternoon. I believe there are 2 of them up for discussion that the board will hear. And then after the Board of Adjustment cases, we will be proceeding to the Planning Commission discussions and action items for the Planning Commission board to consider. If you're online, please be sure to use the Microsoft Teams function to mute your microphones during the process up until you need to speak or want to speak. And if you're calling in from your telephones, we please ask that you use the *6, Pete, is that correct?
That's right, yep. *6 to talk.
So *6 will mute your phone, and then you again press *6 to unmute your phone. And we please ask that you have your phones muted again, unless of course you want to speak. And there will be appropriate times and opportunities throughout both meetings where the public has an opportunity to speak, either in general comments or in specific to each case that's being discussed. So please feel free to mute your phones by pressing *6 and then unmute them in the same manner when you'd like to speak. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight.
Ready? Okay, I'd like to call the May 7th Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Hanson?
Here.
Dargis Johnson? Here. Todd Kays? I believe Todd's present.
Here, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Jeff Brink?
Here.
Stein?
Here.
Oletsky?
Present.
Ford?
Here.
Dolly is absent. Culhane is absent. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. I'd like to make the announcement that there'll be open public comment later in the meeting if anybody would like to speak of any item that's not on the agenda. Jill, would it be appropriate for you to make the announcement of who that we know is on this call that is not on the roll call? I mean, for example, Mr. Van Eye and others.
We have Mr. Head Engineer and Public Works Director Heath Van Eye. I believe we have Matt Roby, attorney, and the mayor, Sarah Karen, and we have building official Ken Buchholz. And anyone else out there participating? Brandy Hatton, planner.
All right, thank you. Go ahead and get started. The first item on the Board of Adjustments is item 20130. We don't. There are no minutes to approve, but it's worth noting that. Thank you.
Deferred. So the owner of application 20130.
Chair, Mr. Chair, Jill, do you have the ability to put the board agenda on the share your screen?
Yeah, can you? I think Jill's working on that.
Did it share? Okay. Thank you, Pete. I need my training. Okay.
Thank you.
The owner is of this property is Sandra Jean and Daniel Messelt. The applicant, the buyer of the property will be Watertown 21569 LLC, owned by Rupi Helmer Group. The property address is 1010 4th Street Northeast. It's indicated in red here. The conditional use request is that the applicant seeks approval to operate a neighborhood retail establishment, Dollar General retail store, in the R3 multifamily residential district for 21-20031 and 21-16034, contingent upon compliance with the purpose of the R3 multifamily district and specific rules governing individual conditional uses. Neighborhood retail establishment is a listed conditional use for the R3 multifamily residential district, and the definition of neighborhood retail establishment is specific. It's generally recognized retail business which supplies commodities on the premises for persons residing in adjacent residential areas, such as but not limited to groceries, meats, dairy products, baked goods, or other foods, drugs, dry goods, clothing, and notions or hardware. Whereas a retail establishment, as opposed to a neighborhood retail establishment, is an establishment engaged in selling products, goods, or merchandise to the general public for personal or household consumption, and establishments engaged in providing services or entertainment to the general public, including convenience stores, petroleum sales, repair shops, indoor amusement, copying services, health, professional, educational, social services, and other miscellaneous services. The applicant submitted a written request and site plan which reflect compliance or non-compliance with the following terms of the ordinance. This board is tasked with reviewing specific rules governing individual conditional uses, which includes ingress, egress of the property, off-street parking, loading, refuse, utilities, service areas, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility. It will also review off-street parking and loading requirements, and the submitted site plan shows 46 off-street parking spaces, 30 are to be improved, and 16 will remain unimproved until necessary. 45 are required by ordinance, so it's meeting compliance. Outside storage and display requirements. This is a commercial use which will need to comply with the ordinance on outside storage for commercial uses. And outside storage may be permitted if acceptable screening is provided and approved by the building official. The board may comment on this since it's going to be approved by you. Displays. The merchandise which is offered for sale, rental, or lease may be displayed beyond the confines of a building. The minimum tree requirement will be met. It is 1 tree per 50 feet of frontage. Perimeter fence and dumpster screening are specified on the detailed site plan sheet number 1. A 15-foot grass boulevard, sidewalk, curb gutter are required on both the south and west sides of the property, and the parcel is to be administratively platted. This board must consider if satisfactory provision and arrangement has been made concerning 210202 2B7A through H, and if application is endorsed, conditions of approval must be specified as a building permit may be issued upon compliant application without return to this board.
Okay, so were you,
I was just going to say I have to make mention that this has already been here before, and it's just been resubmitted because of the addition to the additional property and to move the driveway.
Yes, as Ken said, you may recall that very recently this came to the board, but additional property was added, and so therefore the ingress and egress has changed, the access to the property, and some of the parking has been rearranged. The size of the building and that kind of a thing pretty much are staying the same.
okay, so the additional property is for more parking then?
It is a change in the ingress, egress. They're going to want to come in off of 4th or the highway, north and south, as you might see on the,
Right.
I will show it right here. Before, I believe the parking was a little more to the south, and they were coming in off of 10th Avenue.
Right, because when we had approved it prior, there was some concern about the entrance at that time, which was closer to the corner of 81 and 10th Avenue.
That's correct.
And then we kind of collectively agreed that they were going to move it back, or farther east, I should say.
Right.
And so actually, this would probably work out better the way it kind of looks. In terms of.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Heath Vaughn here. I could expand on that. After the previous approval that we're talking about, you're correct. We worked through these details on the access off 10th with the applicant, and they were able to meet the required setback from the intersection with that access, but it did not accommodate what they felt they needed for ingress and egress into their site. So they revised their plan and procured more property to the north to account for an access coming off of Highway 81. And so it kind of, the necessity to have that proper setback from Highway 81 on 10th required them to essentially shift their plan and come off of Highway 81. So that's how we've gotten where we're at today, due to that additional property that they've acquired for the access off 81.
Keith, how did they address the semis that would come in with merchandise? The other way, I know that we talked about it at length, and they had a pretty good plan. What is their plan now?
Yeah, and I believe, Jill, there's a diagram in your packet. I guess I don't know if it's in the packet. I know they provided a turning, what's called a tracking model that shows a semi maneuvering into and out of their sites for delivery purposes. And it looks to be adequate and appropriate to provide enough space for those deliveries.
Okay.
Jeff Brink, I work with the Department of Transportation, and we did, at the Department of Transportation, receive an access permit request for this property. And on that request, they do go into detail on turning movements and turning radiuses at curb cuts. And we look at distances from other intersections as well as the light. So all of that is being analyzed by the state. The approach location hasn't been approved yet by the state, but if we're still in the reviewal process, and I feel like it's very close to being approved. So I think in those regards, I think at least the DOT feels comfortable with their location of an access and the turning movements.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
This is Kay's question for staff. So with the access to come off the highway, if they ever wanted to come and put access onto 10th Avenue, they'd have to come back before this board?
Commissioner Kays, that would be handled administratively under a curb cut permit from the engineer's office. And if we were to receive an application for such a curb cut, we would check it against the newly adopted engineering design standards, just as we did for this site's review, and see and make sure that it makes the minimum setback requirements from the intersection, which I believe in this case was 100 and I forget off the top of my head, it was like 140 feet, I believe.
Thank you. One other quick question. Is there going to be screening on the south side of the parking lot adjacent to that residential zone property?
Can you see the hand on the screen, Todd?
Yeah.
Is this
Yep.
where you're talking about, in
Yes.
this area? There doesn't appear to be proposed trees there, but
Isn't it a requirement that all commercial uses adjacent to residential uses in an R3 have to be screened? I'm asking because I have intimate knowledge of that.
How much grass space is there going to be from the south side of the parking lot to 10th Avenue? Would that be enough for screening? Just having open
Screening.
green space?
But for this area, that conditional use for that land was already granted. So it's just that sliver to the north now that this is really addressing.
So I think the conditional use right now is that they're coming in and amending their conditional use, so that question of whether or not, there needs to be screening to the south is still germane.
Yes, Todd, I'm looking right now in the, let's see.
I'm
It's
not
what-
seeing it in the application, so that's my question.
Right, the ordinance reads that parking lot screening, adequate screening of a parking lot from adjacent residentially used properties shall be provided. Where residentially used property is across the right-of-way from a parking area, screening shall be provided in all cases, except when the right-of-way is an arterial. Screening shall be an opaque fence, wall, berm, or hedge maintained at least 4 feet in height and in such a manner as not to materially impede vision at intersecting streets, alleys, and driveways. So,
However, 10th Avenue is not an arterial, 10th Avenue is not an arterial street, so the question remains. Are they required? Are they required?
yes. And they're willing to comply.
Willing to comply, then we just need to, I will make, when the motion comes, there will be amendment that staff reviews and approves that. One last question, we talked about before, is the floodplain issue being addressed? Has that been addressed, staff?
Yes, it will be.
Thank you.
I just have a question with the conditional use, and Jill, you had said how it's a new application, but the legal description I don't think reflects that. That it would just be, they have the conditional use for that south part because that came previously, and then now that they're just adding that north part.
The legal description for this application that they gave me, I used Lot 1 Watertown Development Company, second edition. This is supposed to be a new application. It's a new application, but basically it's the same as the other one, which was talked over previously, but they did make this change and therefore it's new.
Jill, can you address the parking for me, that they're gonna have 30 improved and 16 unimproved? Help me out with that.
Okay. You see this area that is white.
Correct.
These indicate parking spaces that will be improved immediately for the store. And then along here, you see kind of invisible parking spaces, which help to make up the required amount that they need. But they, in their franchise, so to speak, they don't usually need that many. So what they've done is made the space available on our site plan to show us that it's available if needed.
And so, if needed, will that also address the floodplain issues? I mean, as far as impervious surface and...
The whole site will be brought into floodplain compliance before it's ever built, so.
But again, I mean... So the additional parking spots will meet floodplain, I mean... All right.
Yeah, so so what you're getting at, Hanson, is if there are detention requirements, if they're creating over an acre of impervious surface, we'll address that, as well as all the floodplain regulations will be taken care of, either if they're bringing in fill and going with a Lomar F, or that they're going to elevate the structure and have a Loma. We'll look at all that before the building permit would be issued.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Case again with a follow-up question. So if I'm understanding you correctly, these are required parking spaces that they feel they don't need at this time, so that's why, they're not putting them in.
Correct, I'll answer that for you. On our commercial properties, we have a required number of parking spots by ordinance, but many times all the parking that we require within our ordinance is not required actually on the site to comply. Sometimes there's hundreds of parking spots that are not required, so we just tell them they have to put in enough parking spots to satisfy their customers. If at such a point that we notice that they're not doing that, we can order them to put in more, but they have to save the land and make sure that it's allocated for all the parking required, because now if the change of use comes in and the next guy needs more parking, that it's there and available, and we've not jeopardized it in the future for the next occupant or whatever. Thank you.
So this is a policy, Ken, that we've done in the past.
Many, many, many times, yep. We'd rather have impervious surface than impervious surface if it's not needed.
No, understood. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Jill, it talks about sidewalk and or the trail. So will the trail go on the south side and then sidewalk along the west?
Brandy, do you know, is that decided yet?
They'll be required, so if you're talking on 10th Avenue?
And Fifth Avenue, or Fifth Street, so both.
And 4th, or,
Yeah,
so
4th,
it's
yeah.
on 4th already, but they will
okay.
they'll have to extend it, by ordinance on 10th Avenue. Now, the only thing that's odd about that is it is kind of going to nowhere, or we could have them sign a waiver of right to protest. Or you guys can make that. Let me think about that. I don't think you'd want to do it as a condition because
I'd let Heath make that decision at the time that we finish this.
Yeah.
Know whether it's needed or if it's going to be connecting good, so.
I'd like to make one clarification here, a correction, actually. I was mentioning the legal description that was used, and I was actually looking at the other report. The legal description for this land does include everything. It's the south 280.01 feet of the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of section 29, 11752 Cottington County, less the south 33 feet and the west 33 feet thereof, and the H lots thereof, and less lots 1 and 2 of Roby Creek addition to the municipality of Watertown.
Well, getting back to the trail, so and I'm fine with leaving that to staff, obviously. My suggestion, though, is because it is a neighborhood store, and therefore, neighborhood to me means walking, perhaps, that I would like to see a trail that leads to nowhere rather than no trail. That's just my own personal opinion.
That is a very busy intersection right there. And that's why I'm really glad. I wasn't here at the first time when they were talking about going off of 10th, but that's why I'm really glad that they are going off of the highway instead of 10th. Otherwise, back up traffic.
Any other questions for Jill at this time? If not, I'll open up the public hearing if there's anyone here or online that would like to speak on behalf or against this item. Seeing none and hearing none, close the public hearing. Further discussion from the board?
Mr. Chair, I really think it's important to seriously think about what we're going to do regarding screening of the parking lot that's adjacent onto the 10th Avenue side. I think there needs to be some sort of screening. It doesn't necessarily need to be a fence. It could be a few trees planted along 10th Avenue. There's nothing wrong with planting trees and adding it just so it helps diffuse some of the light spillage that will come off that parking lot. I would move to move to approve the resolution to move forward on this matter, subject to some sort of screenage being put together, approved by staff, and at the same time, I will put in, for discussion purposes, a motion to require a sidewalk on the 10th Avenue side on the frontage.
I'm gonna clarify just because with it being discussed earlier, so for your screening, that's already required by ordinance. So if in 217304 and then 3, like others have said, that it is adequate screening of a parking lot from adjacent residentially used property shall be provided. So we would make sure that happened during the commercial site plan application, or the commercial building permit application. And that's already in ordinance. So I don't know if you'd have to condition that.
They don't show it, they don't show anything on their drawing, so that's why I'm saying that, I look at that site plan drawing, and if that's what's happening, it would seem to me that there is no requirement for screening on the south.
But remember too that the site plan that they submit, the conditional use doesn't approve the site plan, that still has to be submitted in accordance to ordinance. The conditional use will just be if Board of Adjustment feels that
Right.
the retail
Adjustment has the
establishment is
ability to
appropriate.
establish what kind of screening, but the board has the ability to determine the type of screening.
Yeah, and
I
right now
think, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Heath Bonai here. I think it would be appropriate to note it in the action as Commissioner Kays has. To Brandy's point, when we get the full commercial site plan and building permit application, that is one of the items we would check on.
So, and right now in ordinance, it says that screening shall be an opaque fence, wall, berm, or hedge maintained at least 4 feet in height and in such manner as to not materially impede vision at intersecting streets, alleys, and driveways. So did you guys want to specify which type of screening you want out of that? Otherwise, those are the options that are in ordinance.
You know, looking at that one tree that they have in that southwest or southeast corner, that tree is really close to the intersection. I drive a car, and it is so hard to see around trees when you're in a car. So please take that into consideration, the intersection.
The point that I was trying to make to staff is that I know recently I don't want to hamstring the development so that they have to come back and say, told the fence, and we have to come back and say we want to plant trees. So I just want to make sure that I have no preference of whether it's a fence or whether it's trees. It's just making sure that it's for the record that the zoning board, Board of Adjustment, has determined that it is required and that we're letting staff work that issue out so the applicant doesn't have to come back a year later and say, I want to put trees up instead of a fence.
And since it's in ordinance that's why I was suggesting not making that a condition of the conditional use.
Well, it was placed on me last year, so that's why I'm just asking right now. I just don't want them to have to do the same thing that I did.
Yeah, so I think that can be accomplished by not making it a condition of the conditional use, because it has to be whatever material they're using, the screening has to be provided.
Does that work for you, Mr. Kays?
I'll retract that condition to the motion.
Okay.
I'll second your motion.
Yeah. Could you restate the motion that you made to Todd?
Now the motion would be to approve the amended conditional use permit per the resolution, subject to a sidewalk being constructed along 10th Avenue.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion?
One question,
Yep.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Kays, does that include sidewalk or trail?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, I think we're ready for a vote. Roll call, please.
Okay, Kays,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Jeff Brink,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, 20131.
Okay. This application is by DPC Properties LLC. The property address has not yet been established, but it is here at the southwest corner of the intersection of 4th Avenue South and Oakwood Road, also known as 14th Street West. The application was submitted to construct a non-conforming 7,200 square foot building on a 106,789 square foot parcel, which equates to 2.45 acres, located in the I-1 Light Industrial District. Said structure proposed to be constructed 36 feet from the front or north property line, where a minimum 40 feet is required. And I will show that here quickly. Right here is the issue. Okay, so staff finds that this is a new development on a bare parcel previously utilized as railroad property. Storage units are a permitted use in the I-1 Light Industrial District pursuant to 21-320214. Storage units is defined as a building or buildings for the storage of commercial or private goods and materials in individual units within a common structure without water or sewer utilities. Of note, the following were not addressed in the application. Garbage receptacles must be screened. The path of travel is not shown very well on this, but I do have a drawing that was submitted later that I'll pull up in a minute. All maneuvering of vehicles to access the units must be done on the private property, and outside storage is permitted here. Screening may be required if adjacent land uses are residential or commercial. The minimum area a compliant I-1 parcel can have is 13,800 square feet. This substantial I-1 parcel, compliant in minimum area and width requirements or regulations, has approximately plus or minus 85,000 square feet of legal buildable area within which to comply with the ordinance requirements. Per 2103.024 bulk regulations, this ordinance expresses both regulations in terms of maximum building or structure height, maximum lot coverage, maximum floor area ratio, minimum setbacks, and minimum front, side, and rear yards. No building, structure, or part thereof shall hereafter be built, moved, or remodeled, and no building, structure, or land shall hereafter be used, occupied, or designed for use or occupancy, so as to provide any setback or front, side, or rear yard that is less than specified for the zoning district in which such building, structure, or use of land is located. So here we have basically a clipped corner by the setback regulations. It's almost 4 feet of depth here, and the width is about 9 feet, a little more. This is the close-up view of this little corner of the building, which isn't meeting the front setback regulations.
Okay, so just to be clear, if it weren't for that 16.5 square foot edge of the corner of the building, they would not need a variance. So you're talking 16.5 square feet on a $80+ square foot, 80,000 square foot plus piece of property. Say that again twice.
Yeah, 85,000 square feet of buildable area. So that's minus setbacks.
But this thing is laced with lots of easements, and these buildings are tucked in there between the easements, trying to make them work.
All right, evidently there's going to be storage units. How does staff feel about the ingress and egress off of Oakwood and among the units and the back? Would be the north side of them or northwest side, whatever you want to call that.
Are they also going to egress off of 4th Avenue? Is that what I see in the corner there? I can't tell.
No, they're only coming in from Oakwood.
Okay, what about like trees or a buffer or something? Because across the street, is that zoned residential or is that also light industrial? You know where them houses are, on Fourth Avenue on the north side.
I believe it's R3.
The houses are R3 for the fourplexes that are going up
Yeah.
across there. And then I do probably think it's a joint
Oh, yeah.
zone change. Rhonda, what's yours? R2, isn't it?
It's all R3.
Yeah.
Okay. So do they have to put like a buffer zone or trees or anything then on the north side, the part that just hits Fourth Avenue or not? It's kind of a funny shaped lot.
Well, the screening applies specifically to parking lots.
So there'd be two entrances then off of Oakwood, if I'm looking at this correctly?
Yes.
So Jill, on the, I'm gonna say north of the 60 by 120 building, it looks like there is a curb cut off Fourth Avenue. Is that correct, right there?
It is, right there. Yes, there appears to be one there. Has that been okayed, do we know, by engineering?
Mr. Chairman, Heath here.
Yes, sir.
So the details of the site plan have not been thoroughly vetted and reviewed yet. Of course, the application before the commission this evening is specifically to the variance for that encroachment into that setback area in that northeasterly corner that was discussed. Subsequent to this action, what would happen is the applicant would submit to the engineering and planning and building divisions the appropriate commercial site plan and building permit application. And on that application review process, we would vet in detail any access locations they're proposing, any required paving of those accesses, and things of that nature at that time. So shorter answer is no, that has not been vetted through the review process yet, but it will be subsequent to this action when the applicant submits the appropriate application.
So that means they could get access from there. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yes, if we were to review it and it met all the requirements and we didn't see any traffic impacts that would be compromising on Fourth, we would go ahead and allow that. I can't say with confidence that's what the case would be without providing that review.
I'd like to remind the board, we're kind of talking about access, which go ahead and do, but I'm just mentioning that this isn't a conditional use application, it is only a variance. So it isn't, egress and ingress isn't necessarily a focus.
Fair enough. Any other comments? Any thoughts you want to share on this, Joe?
I don't believe so. It's just a simple matter of this corner. When I did calculate the buildable area, I did take out the easement areas. What you see here is not like a drive area, it's an easement corridor. And so that's why they positioned the building such that they're off of there. There was a recent, and I guess I did not have that in my report, they recently acquired this bit of land here through the Plan Commission and City Council, and that was approved. That wasn't part of this original railroad parcel.
So is that where the outside storage could possibly go?
Their boundary line, yeah, their private property line comes up to here now. So although this is setback and is not buildable area, it is owned by them to, use in other ways, compliant with ordinance.
So again, like the building official Ken had mentioned, that this is kind of the least of obtrusive between all of the or all of the variances or right-of-ways on that property. So again, if we said, hey, slide it to the southwest, they're gonna have more of an encroachment on that opposite corner then. Correctly?
An encroachment on the opposite corner.
So if we, I mean, buildable space, I mean, if we, that structure there, if we moved it again to the southwest, would they have more?
Well, I think, I think the idea, what their options basically are lop off a unit or at least about 4 feet, or just kind of make this a little chopped corner that's been done, or allow the variance, grant the variance.
And if I'm understanding correctly, they can't slide that building down by 4 feet because you're over an easement or some type, or
Because of this, this is a utilities easement.
right? It looks like they've got
corridor.
these buildings wedged right in between all those dotted lines.
Actually, oh, that's cement here, yep.
Yeah, you're correct. Shifting that to the south or southwest, you'd either be encroaching that easement or the front setback at that point. So I think the options that Jill described are probably the primary ones for the board to consider. Either a modification in that corner of the building to be compliant, or a modification in that northeasterly wall and bringing that in entirely, narrowing up the building, or a granting of the variance. Are probably the three main options we're looking at least with the information we have in front of us.
Jill, can you explain how the building, the 30 by 200, doesn't have show access, or, to the drive?
Yeah, we noticed that as a staff. I think it was just a missed in the drawing. There's no reason why they wouldn't connect these.
Did they have the updated site plan too that maybe showed that?
I did. The thing is I can't connect to the end drive.
Oh,
This
well.
this is on the this is from the website, just taking the packet, so I apologize for that.
Well, if you refer to this one, though, it looks like it adjoins that other parking lot. So is that how they think they're going to get access to their property, is going from the 501 Oakwood property? Because their property does actually jog back. I don't know how they would get to it. Do you see what I'm?
They can use the setbacks for driving though.
Yeah.
So they would be able to connect that building to the west with within their site.
Yeah, actually, the two other buildings that aren't requesting a variance can be permitted right now after it gets vetted through us and we agree to the access points.
I'm just wondering why they didn't show how they're getting to it, that's all.
Yeah.
Because that's not the building that we're focusing on either.
No, I'm just looking at the whole plan and it doesn't show it, that's all.
There isn't anyone in the virtual audience here to speak on this, is there? Matt Redlin, for instance?
Yeah, this is Matt with Landmark Builders representing BPC Properties.
Let me open the public hearing first.
Oh, excuse me.
Open the public hearing. Anyone here to speak on behalf or against this item? Please go ahead, Mr. Redlin.
Yeah, here representing Matt Redlin, Landmark Builders representing BPC Properties. The site plan that was submitted and the one that Collinwood Austin has came up with, the access points are in the right location except for between buildings 2 and 3. There's going to be an access and there won't be the far east access that's shown on this drawing now. It actually is getting moved to the west, right there to right there. So it won't be, that'll be deleted and there'll be just access between buildings 2 and 3 and then between 1 and 2. And then also we're proposing an access off of 4th Avenue, but the only thing we're asking for today is the setback variance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
to address commissioners' concerns on the access to that westerly building, I would also emphasize that that is another point that we would look at and review and make sure that the requirements are met to have a paved access to that structure. And I think it would be as simple as them expanding their proposed concrete paving limits as shown on this plan that's in front of you this evening, in order to have that connectivity between buildings 1 and 2. And we would certainly address that administratively at the site plan review level.
All right, thank you. Anyone else to speak on behalf or against this item? Hearing none, close the public hearing. It seems like the item before us is fairly straightforward. Either allow them a variance for 16 and a half square feet to utilize a piece of property that would otherwise be difficult to see what you could do with this with all the easements that they'd have to work around and build around, or not grant the variance, and then they got to make a little bit of a funky shaped building there on the corner. And
Jeff Brink here. When we got the packet, I kind of went out and looked at the site, and the property directly to the north of this on the other side of 4th Avenue is a very similar shaped property. And I believe that one encroaches even closer than, and I know there's the zoning change between the north and south side of the road, but that building is closer to the road. And for that reason, I feel like this applicant is doing the best they can to meet the rules, the intent of the rules of the 40-foot. So I kind of feel that this is the best scenario that they could accommodate. Yeah, I'm looking at that R3 duplexes there on that screen.
Mr. Chair, this is Kays. I also concur that due to the uniqueness of this lot, i.e. the easements that are there, it makes it difficult for anything to be constructed. And I think there's a perfect reasoning for granting a variance.
thank you. Any other comments? Take a motion on this if anybody would care to.
This is Jeff Brink. I would like to make a motion to approve the variance as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Ford, second.
All right, thank you. Roll call vote?
Brink,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
and Stein,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Open to public comment if there was anybody here to speak on behalf of any item that was not on the agenda. Seeing none, we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
I guess the protocol will do a roll call vote for the motion to adjourn.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Brink,
Yes.
Stein,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes. We're adjourned.